I'm getting more personal in this video than I usually do and sharing my story of how I left my 9 to 5 job to go full time with my web design business. I'll tell you about the thought process that I went through to make this life-changing decision and just the whole experience, including both the practical steps and the mindset shifts. I feel like I'm in a good place to also offer some advice if you're thinking of making a similar change and entering the market as a freelance web designer. I have some distance, so I've been able to process a lot, but all of this is still recent enough to be relevant to you. If we haven't met before, hey, I'm Danbee. 5 years ago, I became a full-time freelance web designer and grew my business to 6 figures in profit. Now, I help web designers all around the world build profitable and inclusive businesses so that they too can live a life of freedom. You can get started with my programs for free at danbeeshin.com/training. So the job I left started off as literally the best job that I'd ever had, which makes sense because I had worked up to it my entire adult life. I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering from a global top 10 university in this field. Then I went straight into prestigious corporate programs where I was trained to eventually lead large international businesses. To give you a sense of my ambitions in my early 20s and the environment I was in then, my goal for a really long time was to become the next Sheryl Sandberg or Marissa Mayer. Yeah. Anyway, this position was in Singapore, which was one of the many global offices of an American tech company. This was an advertising technology company that provided an AI platform for buying and selling online ads. And my job was to help our clients use this technology. My previous job before this had been in the construction and engineering industry, so I had a lot to learn, especially about advertising algorithms and how audience targeting actually works. Your phone is not listening to you. Employees here got tons of lifestyle perks. We got free food, free snacks, free beer. This was your typical tech company environment where the average age in the office was maybe 30. We had an unobstructed view of the ocean, we were in the center of the city, and it was very normal to work from home once a week, and you got to choose when that was. And this was years before COVID, when all of this was very not normal for most people. I also love that I got to go to New York City once a year for work, and you can bet that I extended every trip to include a personal holiday. But there was more than just the shiny, superficial stuff. D&I, diversity and inclusion, was a strategic pillar for the company, and this is before DEI became the more common term. We had strong women leaders throughout the company. I had direct access to the founder and CEO, and learning from each other and teaching each other was really, truly embedded in the culture. My direct manager in Singapore was literally the best manager that I'd ever had. He was so supportive and so kind and championed my work. Every day I went into work feeling so happy and so grateful that I was surrounded by some of the smartest people that I'd ever worked with. And of course, it helped that I was earning nearly 6 figures when converted to US dollars. But as you can probably guess, over time, things changed dramatically, especially after we were acquired by one of the largest corporations in the world. Some of my favorite colleagues left. DEI initiatives were either deprioritized or scrapped, and my role kept changing all the time without any of the necessary training. My health took a nosedive. I had frequent migraines and excruciating stomach aches that took almost a year to properly diagnose and treat. The culture had become so rigid that I felt the pressure to prioritize sitting in my chair at the office over going to doctor's appointments and taking care of myself. I started dreading going to work. I did not want to make any more money for rich white guys in the US who had no idea that I even existed. Some mornings I would wake up, open my eyes, and just lie there because I could not find the motivation to move. But I kept going because this was the career that I'd built for 10 years. And even when things were terrible, I kept getting promotions and raises. Here's the thing that gave me the push I needed to get out. I was at Changi Airport in Singapore, ready to board a flight to an important client meeting when I found out that my grandfather in Atlanta in the US had suddenly fallen critically ill. My brain must have stopped working. I was in tears, still in line to get on the plane, when the coworker I was traveling with said very gently, Danbee, you know you don't have to come on this trip. And that kind of woke me up, and for that, I will always be grateful to him. So after calling my manager and navigating the chaos of leaving the airport, I hope you never have to do that after clearing immigration and security. I went home, I packed, went straight back to the airport, and 26 hours later, I was in Atlanta. When I finally arrived at the hospital, I walked into my grandfather's room where my mom and my sister, who had also just flown in, my grandmother, aunts, and younger cousins were gathered around him. As you might know, I am South Korean. I myself have never lived in the US, but many of my relatives, including my grandparents, immigrated from South Korea over the last few decades and became US citizens. I share this to give you a bit of context because I did not expect what happened next, given that I was coming into the situation as a bit of an outsider. When the doctor came by to check in on my grandfather, I ended up being the person to speak with her, asking her questions that we had been discussing amongst ourselves. You know, questions like, what is the actual precise diagnosis? How was my grandfather doing? And how long did we have? I approached the doctor with my phone in my hand with the Notes app open, and I typed as she spoke. I can tell you, years of watching Grey's Anatomy did not prepare me for this. Then the doctor left. I walked her to the door and shut the door behind her. Then the most unexpected thing happened. The tension, the silence in the room broke, and everyone clapped for me. It was like I'd just given the most impressive performance. In that moment, I realized how much extra pressure families like ours carry in these situations where language barriers and cultural differences can make even simple, totally normal conversations with your doctor feel overwhelming. In the midst of all this, I was getting calls from work asking when I would be back in the office. It was a fair question, even though I had already arranged to work remotely for a couple of weeks, but I just felt hounded. The way it was communicated made it clear that they didn't care about how I was doing or how my family was coping. It felt like getting my butt back in that office chair was expected to take priority over everything else. And something just broke. It was time to leave. I basically said, F this, and put all my energy into taking care of my family and myself. My grandfather passed away 10 days later, and after the funeral, I returned to Singapore. And shortly after that, I handed in my resignation. When I asked people what questions they had for me for this video, one of my clients asked what I found the hardest before quitting and after. Before quitting, there were so many things that I was scared of. I almost don't want to admit this, but I was scared of disappointing my parents. They had sacrificed so much to make my life and my then version of success possible. They'd moved abroad for the first time in their 30s and worked endlessly in their second language, no less. And all of that to create opportunities for me and my sister. But you know what? They took it surprisingly well. They trusted me to make the right decision for myself, which is what they have actually always done. I was also scared of wasting my career. I had worked so hard to get to where I was since I was about 15, balancing perfect grades with playing competitive soccer, organizing and chairing Model United Nations, performing in the school plays and musicals. I had always believed that that's how I had gone into the right university, landed the right job offers, and earned the right promotions. And now I was quitting, and not even to start a venture capital funded tech company. I was going to freelance and start a lifestyle business. I mean, goodbye Sheryl Sandberg dreams. I definitely had to take some time to grieve all this, but I also told myself that I could change my mind. I could always come back and get a job if I wanted to. So that was before. After I quit and started working for myself full time, things were really hard for a while. And obviously, because I had never done this before. For one thing, imposter syndrome hit hard. Calling myself a web designer almost felt like a lie because I was giving myself this title and not someone else. I had no formal training, just years of making websites for fun. Also, I worked so much. I hustled hard. I was booking calls from 6 a.m. to midnight and working weekends. It was just not sustainable. I also found working with clients really stressful. I had clients who ghosted me, who argued with me about scope, and missed deadlines over and over again. What changed all this is I stopped seeing my 9 to 5 work experience as something in the past, something that I left behind, something completely separate from who I was now as a business owner. Once I let go of a lot of the emotional baggage around throwing my career away, I began applying the skills and knowledge from that experience in my own business. I built my own system for getting clients and delivering high quality websites. If you've heard me talk about the fast track system, this is it. This is when I started attracting better fit clients who saw me as a trusted advisor. That's when I started getting booked out 3 to 4 months in advance, and I even started booking 10,000 US dollar websites. By my second year in business, I was bringing home more cash than I had at my last job. When another one of my clients found out I was doing this video, they asked about the biggest mindset shift that I had to make this transition. If I had to pick just one, I had to learn to rely less on external validation to know that I'm doing the right thing. Now that I work for myself, there's no one verifying my objectives or carrying out performance reviews or telling me what my job title is. I have to trust myself and my intuition. And of course, this is something I'm still working on. It was really helpful to work with a business coach who could provide objective feedback and advice and encouragement because that helped me take action. And the more action I took, the more I saw that I actually knew what I was doing. And that helped me build confidence. Don't get me wrong, I still love getting gold stars from other people, but they just don't have the same kind of power over my sense of success. Okay, now I'm going to cover some of the more nitty-gritty details. Let's do this lightning round Q&A style. How did you prepare to work for yourself full-time and how long did that take? I gave myself 1 year to run this as a side hustle and set myself 2 goals. I told myself that if I could book 2 full website projects and save up 6 months worth of expenses, then that would suffice as my proof of concept. I could quit my job and do this full time. When I did eventually hand in my resignation, it hadn't quite been 1 year, but I had already achieved those 2 goals. If you could go back, would you do it sooner or later? I want to say sooner, but honestly, I'm not sure. There's one scenario where I might have done it later. Before I handed in my formal resignation, I tried to negotiate a part time contract with my employer. And if that had worked out, I would have delayed going full time. So if you are in a similar situation, this could be a good way to kind of soften that transition. Did you have a plan B, C, or D? I didn't, but of course, I cycled through so many worst case scenarios. And I also want to take a moment here to acknowledge my privilege. Because, of course, I asked myself, what would I do if I didn't earn enough as a web designer? Well, the answer was I was living with my long term partner, now husband, who had a very secure and well paying job. I know that not everyone has a safety net like that. I wouldn't feel good about not contributing to our household income, but we would be okay. I also feel really grateful that my partner has always been my biggest supporter. That made a huge difference when I was doing scary new things. Another worst case scenario that I considered was what if I couldn't get a new visa to stay in Singapore? The thing is, this was a really unlikely scenario given my profile and the strength of my South Korean passport. Passport privilege is real. But if this did become a problem, I could always go back to South Korea and stay with my parents while I figured things out. How did you choose web design? Web design was something I could offer right away without needing additional training or building a large audience, both of which required time. This might be a bit taboo to say, but I didn't get into web design because it was my passion or life's calling. It was a vehicle for building my life of freedom. It gave me the freedom to choose how and where I spend my time when I'm working. If you enjoy making websites, web design could be a great way to start working for yourself and building your life of freedom. Some people might say that it's a saturated market, but there are more than enough businesses out there who need help with their websites. And new businesses start up every single day, so there's plenty of room for more web designers. There are lots of questions that I got about quitting my job and working for myself that I didn't get around to answering here, so I might do another one of these videos in the future. If that is something you would watch, give me a thumbs up on this video, and if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. If you also want to build a web design business, the next video I recommend watching is about what high-ticket clients really want from their designer. That should be showing up on your screen right now. See you there.